A Saudi billionaire spent 180,000 riyals on a lion, built him a marble enclosure, dressed him in a gold collar, and posted 34 photos online, calling him family. His wife walked into that enclosure on a Tuesday afternoon to film content, and the lion put her on the tile in under 2 seconds. The question nobody who saw those photos ever thought to ask is the one that matters most. How long had that animal been deciding to do it? It was March 14th, 2019, and the air inside the Al-Rashidi compound on the eastern edge of Riyadh smelled like money and something older. The marble floors had been imported from Italy. The fountain in the central courtyard had been custom built by a designer who worked on hotel lobbies in Dubai. Date palms lined the perimeter wall in perfect rows, their shadows cutting long, dark lines across the stone in the early afternoon heat. None of it mattered to the lion. Faisal Al-Rashidi was 38 years old. He had inherited his father's construction empire at 29 and spent the years since decorating his life the way other men decorate offices. He owned 4 cars that cost more than most people earn in a lifetime. He owned a private box at a stadium in London, and for 2 years, he had owned Atlas, a male African lion purchased through a broker who operated on WhatsApp and asked no questions. His wife, Noor, was 31. She had 340,000 followers on Instagram, and a large portion of her content featured Atlas lying across the courtyard tiles while she sat nearby in expensive linen, looking calm. The photos performed well. The comments always said the same things. How beautiful. How brave, how incredible that they could live like that. The staff didn't comment. The household employed 11 people, and every one of them had developed a private habit around Atlas. The groundskeeper checked the enclosure gate twice before crossing the courtyard. The housekeeper took the long route around the east wing to avoid passing the iron gate separating Atlas from the main living area. The man who delivered the lion's meat 3 times a week, a quiet man named Tariq, had approached Faisal 6 months earlier and told him the animal was changing. Atlas had begun pacing the enclosure in the early morning hours. He had started watching the household staff with a fixed stillness that experienced handlers recognize immediately as a shift in predatory focus. Tariq had worked with large cats for 11 years. He told Faisal the lion needed more space and professional oversight. Faisal laughed and told Tariq to add more meat to the weekly order. The enclosure measured 18 feet by 22 feet. A male African lion in the wild ranges across territory spanning up to 100 square miles. Atlas weighed 390 pounds. His jaws could generate more than 650 pounds of force per square inch, enough to collapse the skull of a full-grown buffalo. None of that appeared in the Instagram captions. On the morning of March 14th, Noor decided to film a new video inside the enclosure. She had done it 3 times before, without incident, and that footage always performed better than anything else she posted. Faisal agreed without hesitation. The gate was unlocked at 1:14 in the afternoon. Tariq had arrived for the weekly delivery and stood at the courtyard entrance, watching, and he had seen the way Atlas looked at the gate when it opened. He had seen that look before, on a different animal, in a different compound, 1 week before something went very wrong. He stood still and said nothing, because men like Faisal did not pay him to speak. The gate swung inward. Noor stepped inside first, phone raised, smiling. Atlas lay against the far wall, his massive head resting on his paws, his amber eyes open and completely still. African lions cannot be domesticated. 10,000 years of living near humans has not changed the part of a lion's brain that reads movement, reads stillness, reads the angle of a body crossing unfamiliar ground as either threat or prey. Selective breeding has not touched it. Hand rearing does not remove it. Handlers who work with large cats professionally understand this the way a pilot understands weather. You do not eliminate the risk. You manage distance, and you never forget what the animal is. Atlas had been hand-reared from 6 weeks old at a facility in South Africa. before being transferred to Riyadh at 14 months. Male African lions reach full maturity between 4 and 5 years of age. By March 2019, Atlas was 3 years and 2 months old. His testosterone levels had been climbing for 6 months. His territorial instincts were sharpening week by week. The pacing Tariq had reported was not restlessness. It was a behavioral shift seen in apex predators entering prime competitive age with no outlet for any natural drive at all. He had not attacked, but that fixed, unblinking attention he directed at the gate every time it opened was not calm. Tariq later told investigators, "That animal was not watching us the way a pet watches its owner. He was watching us the way something watches a door it is planning to go through." Faisal entered behind Noor, phone raised, framing a shot. He wore a white dish dasha and leather sandals. The enclosure floor was smooth tile, slightly sloped toward a central drain. The smell inside was thick and warm. Raw meat and the dense musk large cats produce from scent glands along their jaw. Faisal had stopped noticing it months ago. Atlas lifted his head as the gate closed. His ears rotated forward. His weight shifted almost invisibly onto his front legs. Noor moved toward him slowly, the way she always did. Phone angled down to capture the approach. She was 12 feet away when Atlas stood. A male African lion stands 3.5 feet at the shoulder and reaches 10 feet from nose to tail. When Atlas rose, the change inside the enclosure was immediate and physical, the way a room changes when something very large moves inside it unexpectedly. Noor stopped walking. Faisal looked up from his phone. Atlas stood with his full weight forward, head lowered slightly, eyes fixed on Noor with the total, unbroken focus of an animal that had made a decision. His tail moved once, a slow sideways sweep. Handlers call it the signal. It is the last observable behavior before a large cat commits to a charge. Neither Faisal nor Noor knew what it meant. Tariq, standing outside the gate with the meat delivery, recognized it immediately. He opened his mouth. He was too far away, and the gate was closed, and what he said did not reach them in time. Atlas covered 12 feet in under 2 seconds. Noor had no time to turn. His right forepaw struck her upper back with a force consistent with being hit by a vehicle at speed. She went forward onto the tile face first, her phone skipping across the floor and spinning to a stop near the drain. The impact drove every breath from her body, and she could not make a sound for the first several seconds, which were the most critical seconds of her life. Faisal was 4 feet behind her when the charge happened. He hit the enclosure wall with his back, sandals sliding on the smooth tile. He did not fall. He pressed against the wall and could not move. Atlas clamped his jaws around the back of Noor's neck and upper shoulder. The bite force of an adult male African lion generates enough pressure to collapse the trachea of a full-grown wildebeest in under 4 seconds. Noor weighed 54 kilograms. Atlas pinned her to the floor with his full 390 pounds, his jaws holding the grip while she was pressed flat against the tile. She began screaming then, a high broken sound that carried out of the enclosure and across the marble courtyard and reached Tariq, who was already running for the compound's side entrance, shouting for anyone to call emergency services. 2 household staff members in the kitchen heard him, but did not understand at first what he was saying. Valuable seconds passed. A worker named Hessa later told police, "I heard a sound I had never heard before. I thought something had fallen. And then I heard Noor screaming, and I knew." Faisal grabbed a feeding bucket from near the gate and threw it. It struck Atlas across the flank. The lion released Noor briefly and turned toward Faisal with the slow, unhurried attention of an animal that is not frightened by noise. Noor pushed herself upward. Her right arm did not respond correctly. She reached her knees before Atlas turned back. He struck her across the left shoulder with a single downward motion that drove her onto the tile again. His claws opened 4 deep wounds across her shoulder and upper chest. Blood spread across the white tile and moved toward the drain in a thin, dark line. Faisal reached the gate, hands shaking. The latch required a two-handed motion he had never paid close attention to before. He opened it on the third attempt and ran into the courtyard, or he did not go back for Noor. Tariq had already reached the side entrance and was directing two workers toward the compound. One had a phone and was connected to emergency services. The operator asked for the address twice because the situation being described did not match any standard category. The response unit was told it was a domestic disturbance. Inside the enclosure, Atlas stood over Noor, with his weight settled and his breathing slow. She was conscious and making sounds that were quieter now. The air conditioning unit on the outer wall ran steadily, cooling the room, indifferent to everything below it. Emergency services arrived 19 minutes after the first call. Noor survived. The surgical team that worked on her that night documented a fractured collarbone, a partially collapsed vertebra in her neck, 4 deep wounds across her left shoulder and chest, and nerve damage to her right arm, requiring 18 months of rehabilitation. She spent 3 weeks in hospital. Her Instagram account, which had featured Atlas in 34 posts across 2 years, was deleted before she was discharged. She has not spoken publicly about the incident. Atlas was confiscated by Saudi wildlife authorities the following day. The investigation confirmed what Tariq had already known for months. The lion had never been registered under any legal permit. The broker who arranged the sale operated across 5 Gulf states and held no licenses in any of them. Faisal received a fine and a suspended sentence. The broker was never located. So the incident triggered a wider sweep that resulted in 11 additional exotic animals being seized from private properties across Riyadh that same month. Faisal had paid 180,000 riyals for Atlas. He had spent twice that on the enclosure, the feeding schedule, and the custom gold collar. He had been told the lion was calm, well-handled, and safe around people. None of that was ever true. Wildlife biologist Dr. Rana Khalid, who reviewed the case for the Saudi National Wildlife Authority, stated plainly this animal showed every warning sign of a predator approaching maturity in a confined space. Those signs were reported and dismissed. The outcome was predictable. Atlas was not a pet. He was a 390-pound predator who had been patient for 2 years inside an 18 by 22-foot room, 34 photos, 104 weeks, and on a Tuesday afternoon in March, in a marble enclosure that cost more to build than most people earn in 10 years, his patience ran out. The gold collar is still in an evidence locker somewhere in Riyadh. The lion never knew he was wearing it.